Morning, Doctor.
Morning. Is everybody ready?
Morning. Good morning. Sorry, my mic was off.
Yes.
Need to be quite a long. Okay lah, record lah, yang record lah. Record ya. Iya, record. Record lah, okay lah. Terus ya. Awak ambil tak boleh record.
Assalamualaikum, good morning, salam sejahtera, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Economic Planning Unit Prime Minister's Department EPU, I would like to welcome everyone to our first webinar, the 12th Plan, Developing the Nation in the Spirit of Keluarga Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, with us today, Yang Kehormat Dato Sri Mustapa Mohamed, Minister in the Prime Minister's Department Economy. Welcome, Dato Sri. I also would like to welcome our moderator, Yang Berusaha, Dr. Suraya Ismail, Director of Research, Khazanah Research Institute, as well as our three panelists, Yang Berusaha, Dr. Zunika Binti Mohamed, Deputy Director General Makro, Economic Planning Unit, Prime Minister's Department, Yang Berbahagia, Tan Sri Datuk Soh Tian Lai, President of Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers FMM, and Yang Berbahagia, Profesor Dr. Denison Jayasooria, Honorary Professor, Institute of Ethnic Studies, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia. Welcome everyone. My name is Nur Hidayah Salman and I will be your MC today. Once again, welcome to the 12th Plan, Developing the Nation in the Spirit of Keluarga Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, a little bit housekeeping announcement to all participants. Please make sure your microphone is turned off throughout the webinar. Therefore, feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. To the participants who are joining us from EPU Malaysia FB Live, you may ask questions or give your thoughts in the comment section. Please state your name and your organization, and our moderator will love to forward your questions to our panelists. Start our event today, I would like to invite Yang Kehormat Dato Sri Mustapa Mohamed, Minister in the Prime Minister's Department Economy, to give his opening remarks. Dipersilakan.
Terima kasih Saudara Hidayat. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, selamat pagi. Good morning everyone. Dr. Suraya, our moderator, Dr. Zunika, Deputy DG of EPU, Tan Sri So, President FMM, Dr. Denison, Secretariat Head of the YBhg, All Party Parliamentary Group on Sustainable Development Goals. Tuan-tuan dan puan sekalian, let me welcome everyone to this Zoom meeting. The long-awaited 12th Malaysia Plan will be tabled in Parliament on the 27th of September, a couple of weeks ago. The uncertainties created by the COVID-19 have delayed the tabling of the 12th Plan 4 times. As a prelude to this tabling, the EPU has decided to build up some momentum by encouraging public discussion on the future direction of the Malaysian economy in the next 4 to 5 years. Like the 5-year plans that came before this, the 12th Plan will provide an overarching trajectory of the government's development agenda. It provides a sense of direction to government agencies, the private sector, investors, and the public at large on the overall policy direction of the Malaysian government. We started the development planning process as early as 1956, when the first Malaya Plan was introduced. The Tunku's Plan focused on agricultural reforms. The second Malaysia Plan introduced the game-changing new economic policy, which aimed at reducing poverty and reducing the wealth gaps between the races in our country. The 12th Plan will focus on rebuilding the Malaysian economy in line with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and the Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama. In preparing the plan, the EPU has extensively engaged with various stakeholders as early as April 2019. I thank members of the private sector, civil society, MPs, government ministries, agencies, and the public for all their inputs. Ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 has resulted in job losses and business closures. Many lives were lost. The pandemic has laid bare a number of economic problems at the root of Malaysia's structural issues. Poverty, income inequalities, low productivity are some of the challenges which have been exacerbated by the pandemic. On wealth inequality, based on Dawson's estimates, the Gini coefficient, for example, rose from 0.407 in 2019 to 0.411 in 2020, demonstrating a bigger gap between the rich and the poor in this country. Secondly, on poverty, the percentage of Malaysians who live below the poverty line grew from 5.6% in 2019 to about 8.4% last year. More than 600,000 households from the M40 group have slipped into the B40 income category. Unemployment peaked at 5.3% in May 2020 and remained high at 5.1% in the second quarter of 2020. Due to the high number of COVID-19 cases, which disrupted economic activities, Bank Negara, as you know, revised downwards our GDP growth forecast for this year to between 3 to 4% from the previous forecast of between 6 to 7.5%. In the last 18 months, the government, as you know, has announced 8 stimulus packages totaling 530 billion ringgit, or about 36% of our GDP, to protect lives and livelihoods, as well as to support businesses. These programs included cash transfers like the Bantuan Prihatin Nasional, which benefited close to 11 million people, and wage subsidy programs aimed at retaining jobs, which benefited more than 2.5 million workers and more than 300,000 employers. These packages have been instrumental in supporting income and businesses, as well as helping to arrest a sharper decline in economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, as highlighted in the World Bank's Aiming High Report, which was published earlier this year, Malaysia needs to address several issues as we make the transition to a high-income economy. These issues include the relatively slower rate of economic growth compared to many countries that achieve high-income status in recent decades. Malaysia has a lower share of employment in higher skilled jobs and higher levels of inequality compared to many other countries that have already graduated from middle income status. And compared to the OECD countries, our tax to GDP ratio is low. Our social protection is insufficient, and we perform relatively poorly in terms of measures related to environmental management and corruption. The challenges we have been facing in the last 18 months, of course, have also presented an opportunity to revisit our policies and strategies. Our priority is to build back better, to rebuild the Malaysian economy, to place Malaysia on a stronger economic footing, and to build a more competitive economy. Our priorities in the next 10 years are as follows. 1, increasing income, eliminating absolute poverty, and reducing development gaps between states and regions. 2, ensuring quality growth, which is sustainable, growth which will not compromise the environment. 3, creating a policy environment that is conducive to private sector growth, investors, both foreign and local. 4, growth and development which is inclusive and which will result in more unity and cohesion in the context of Keluarga Malaysia. And 5, ensuring that the government mission delivery, ensuring that the government delivery mechanism is enhanced to meet our developmental goals. Ladies and gentlemen, in the context of Keluarga Malaysia, of the Keluarga Malaysia concept expanded by our Prime Minister, we have to translate this idea to concrete action plans. To me, the idea of a Malaysian family means that we put aside all our differences and strengthen our bonds of friendship. Keluarga Malaysia also invokes the desire to bridge gaps and to promote happiness among our family members. The Malaysian family has to be united in order to achieve progress and stability. This webinar is an opportunity for us to come up with some ideas to discuss the parameters of the Keluarga Malaysia concept. Ladies and gentlemen, in growing the nation's economy, we must also ensure that development is sustainable and environmentally friendly. We remain committed to ensure that government policies always take into account the need to preserve our nation's rich biodiversity for the benefit of our future generations. In our pursuit of increasing growth, we cannot neglect our responsibility to the earth. We want to enjoy our prosperity in a country that has clean rivers, clean air, extensive forest reserves, and a sustainable way of life. Only then can Malaysia make the transition to become a competitive, high-income economy and create a better Keluarga Malaysia. On that note, once again, let me, on behalf of YBhg, thank our moderator, our paper presenters, and the audience for joining the YBhg in this very important discussion as a prelude to the presentation of the 12th Malaysia Plan document to Parliament on the 27th of September. Thank you. I wish you a successful and productive conference. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Yang Berhormat Dato Sri Mustapa Mohamed, for your opening remarks. A gentle reminder to all participants, please state your name and your organization when you ask questions and give views in the chat box or comment section in FB Live. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, we jump straight to our main session. For that, I would like to invite Yang Berusaha Dr. Suraya Ismail, Director of Research Khazanah Research Institute, to start the session and to introduce our panelists. The floor is yours. Dipersilakan, Doktor.
Terima kasih, Hidayat. Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat sejahtera to all our guests. Yang Berhormat Dato Sri Mustapa Mohamed, Minister in the Prime Minister's Department. Our distinguished panelists, Yang Berusaha Dr. Zunika Mohamed, Deputy Director General of EPU. Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Datuk President FMM. And Yang Berbahagia Prof. Datuk Dr. Denison Jayasooria, Honorary Professor, Institute of Ethnic Studies, UKM. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very fortunate today to have distinguished panelists for today's webinar. These panelists come from different areas of public life, the government, the private sector, and civil society. And I'm sure they will bring a lot of perspective of the Malaysian plan for its successful implementation. The 12th Malaysian Plan, as a mukadimah, will face monumental challenges. This is because it is with the backdrop of COVID-19, the pandemic, and even climate change, which has had a devastating impact on our country and the world as well. Against this backdrop, government have intrinsic duties to its citizens. This is a social contract, namely safeguarding the citizen's survival and physical security and the citizens' rights to socio-economic well-being. The COVID-19 pandemic threatens all of the above. The pandemic takes lives from families, and lockdown, social distancing robs many firms and households from their everyday incomes and social interactions. Far-reaching government intervention has become a necessity to save economy, which is likely to emerge unchanged. So the question today is it just the government, all-of-government approach, or should we have an all-of-society approach in tackling and helping the government achieve its objectives? It is within this backdrop that I'm happy to introduce our panelists. Each panelist will be presenting about 20 minutes of their presentation. And I will start with the first presentation by our Yang Berusaha Dr. Zunika Binti Mohamed, Deputy Director General, with her topic, which is the perspective on medium-term policy formulation and planning, the 12th Malaysian Plan. The floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suraya, the moderator for today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. Yang Berhormat Dato Sri Dato Sri Mustapa Mohamed, Minister in the Prime Minister Department Economy, Tan Sri Datuk Tian Lai, as well as Prof. Datuk Dr. Denison Jayasooria, who also joined me in the panelists today for this seminar. For my presentation today, I will focus on a few key terms. Firstly, is to provide a framework of policy planning in Malaysia. This is just to recap the role of planning in overall the perspective of economic development in Malaysia. Secondly, I will also share what we have been doing for the last 2 years in developing the draft document, and also highlights some of key issues and challenges that we are facing. Some of these challenges had also been highlighted by YB Minister just now. And lastly, to touch on some of focus areas taking on board in the 12th plan. Let's go to the first part of my presentation. By way of introduction, Malaysia actually is adopting a 3-tier planning horizon. The second slide, please. I hope everybody see my slide. In this 3-tier planning horizon, we have long-term planning, of which more than 5 years, to prepare a long-term framework. Second, we have medium-term planning, over 3 to 5 years. And third, we have a short-term planning, of which 1 to 2 years. An example of this 5-year or more planning for long-term, we have outline perspective plan, Vision 2020, new economic model, and the last is wawasan kemakmuran bersama. For the medium term, we are talking about 5-year development plan, of which we have finished our 11 Malaysia plan, and now we are going into the 12th Malaysia plan. And for short-term planning, it is annual budget by the Ministry of Finance and also annual report by the Bank Negara Malaysia. In the next slide, this is the foundation of 12th Malaysia plan, of which has also been mentioned by the Minister just now, that for the 12th plan, we are looking at 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as the foundation, as well as the Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama 2030, together with the latest announcement by our Prime Minister, the Spirit of Keluarga Malaysia. So this actually is our journey into the next future, taking into account all the relevant focus, the long-term goal by the government in a holistic manner. In the next slide, the whole of nation approach, Dr. Suraya mentioned just now whether we should take the government, whole of government approach or whole of society approach. So in preparing for the document, we have taken the whole of nation approach with extensive engagements with stakeholders. We have engaged private sector, government, as well as industry leaders, experts of local and international agencies, in order to ensure that we take on board all the voices from our stakeholders. And we also go into states, government to take their opinion on board as well. So we have started this exercise actually in July 2019. So since then, it has been 2 years that we are doing this. In the next slide, this is the milestone that we have taken in preparing the 12th Malaysia plan, of which it started with the KSN instruction letter in April 2019, and we have our first phase of engagement session in May 2019 to June 2020. Actually, when we did our first engagement session in May, this was prior to COVID-19. So we have taken on board in this first phase of engagement all the points from our stakeholders. And because of COVID-19, we have also done our second phase of engagement in June 2020 to May 2021. And there was also an announcement by the 8th Prime Minister on the 12th Plan Essence on 1st March 2021 in the Majlis Amanat Perdana Setahun Malaysia Prihatin. This is our journey, and in the next step will be our presentation of this 12th plan by our Prime Minister to the House of Representatives on the 27th September 2021. Malaysia actually has recorded rapid and stable economic growth since 1970s, but it has been contracted in 2020 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of the average income of the rakyat, it has been increased more than 30 times since 1970. And our real GDP has also recorded over 5% growth for the period from 2017 to 2020, in spite of facing 6 economic downturns since 1970. And in terms of our per capita income, Malaysia is expected to be a high-income nation. Originally, we are expected to be the high-income nation in the 11th plan. Unfortunately, because of the COVID-19, we will expect that we can overcome this middle income track and to leapfrog into the high income nation in the next couple of years. The broad perspective of, let's go to the earlier slide. The broad perspective of the 12th plan. Here, the 12th plan actually is the first phase of Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama, the WKB 2030, and it has also been aligned with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, or SDGs, covering 3 dimensions, economic, social, as well as environment. And in relation to the last exercise by the government in ensuring that we came out of COVID-19 pandemic, the 12th plan is also the last part of the National Recovery Plan under the 6R for reform. The 12th plan will take into account some of the challenges that we are facing right now, current issues and challenges that need to be focused and addressed through new approaches, of which the COVID-19 pandemic actually have revealed several weaknesses in the structure of the Malaysia economy. We've seen digital divide in the education sector, the readiness of our SME in adopting digitalization, lack of social protection, as well as the transformation in our economic sector. Actually, we are still at low value-added economy, low technology content. And with these challenges, the goal of our 12th plan is to achieve a prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable nation based on the spirit of Keluarga Malaysia. These are some of the key issues and challenges that we have taken into account in preparing the document. From economic perspective, it is about economic growth, of which we are focusing on trade challenge as well as geopolitical tensions, low productivity growth and less competitive MSMEs. In terms of technology adoption and digitalization, as well as R&D and C&I, we are looking at readiness of 4IR technology adoption throughout our society. It is still very low. We are still facing digital divide, as well as lack of R&D and C&I, of which slow down our ability to generate economic growth from commercialization of our research. And on the social part, again, poverty, gap in the healthcare system, as well as imbalanced regional development, including in Sabah and Sarawak, as well as other less developed states. For environment, we need to have to address unsustainable production, consumption, and lifestyle. And lastly, we also focus on the issue related to governance due to lack of coordination among stakeholders. Comparing 11th plan and 12th plan in the next slides, there are some similarities and some differences. In terms of the approaches, we are looking at more or less similar concept. For 11th plan, we have focused on people-centric growth in terms of goal, while for 12th plan, it is broader in terms of prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable nation. In terms of economy, we will focus more on restoring our economic growth. For the social, we want to develop an inclusive society, a balanced development that is based on Keluarga Malaysia. In terms of environment, while we move towards green growth during the 11th plan, we want to accelerate this green agenda. For the human capital, the focus, we want to move forward with our future talent. And for technology, definitely, we have to do more in terms of digital and advanced technology, particularly from the 4IR, advancement in 4IR technology. And lastly, in terms of governance, we want to enhance the efficiency of the civil service. And I think that's all. My presentation today, a snapshot of the overall picture of what we are focusing on in the 12th plan document. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zunika. It's heartening to see that it is a whole of nation approach with a lot and several stakeholder engagements. And I'm sure even this 12th Mission Plan is still not cast in stone. It has yet to be submitted to the Cabinet. And I suppose it's one of the other reasons that we do these webinars now, to promote discourse on the 12th Malaysian Plan within the spirit of the concept Keluarga Malaysia. Without further ado, I would like to invite I would like to invite Tan Sri Dato President of FMM, to give his presentation. Now that the government has given their approaches to the 12th Mission Plan, let's see the reaction from the industry. And this is Tan Sri's duty here today, with his presentation that is entitled The 12th Mission Plan, Industry's Perspective and Expectation. Please, Tan Sri, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. A very good morning. Yang Berhormat Dato Sri Mustapa Mohamed, Minister in the Prime Minister Department, fellow speakers, Yang Berusaha Dr. Zunika Binti Mohamed, Deputy DG, Economic Planning Unit, Yang Bahagia Profesor Dato Dr. Denison, Principal Research Fellow, Institute of Ethics Studies, UKM, and Dr. Suraya Ismail, Director of Research, Kasana Research Institute, our moderator for this morning session, the MC and all participants. First of all, thank you very much for inviting FMM to share the industry's perspective and expectations of the 12th Malaysia Plan, which will be tabled at Parliament on September 27. It is indeed an honor to speak at this first series of webinars organized by EPU as we approach the release of the important economic development plan in this period of the COVID-19 pandemic, which outline immediate policy response and impact on top of the strategies for long-term outcomes, as well as towards achieving shared prosperity vision 2020. Can you put to the slide 3? Slide 3. Okay. Business has been very challenging, both at the domestic and international levels due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The resurgence of COVID-19 infections in the past few months due to the more virulent variants of the virus has resulted in multiple lockdowns. And as of today, every industry still has this devastating impact. The manufacturing sectors continue to be a catalyst of growth despite of this severe impact of the COVID pandemic, and contributes 23% of the Malaysian economy. The sector has also been the pillar of economic growth during the pandemic period, as seen in the positive economic performance from third quarter 2020 to second quarter 2021. However, we note that based on Bank Negara second quarter report, the second quarter seasonally adjusted, the quarter-on-quarter manufacturing growth, in fact, declined by 1.5%, a result of MCO 3.0 due to limited operations, which impacted demand domestically for products in the consumer and construction-related clusters, as well as the inability of the sector to meet its export orders, including its global supply chain obligations. Manufacturing contribution to GDP dropping over years and also stagnant since 2013. Nevertheless, the sector continued to play a significant role in the economy, including contributing about 86% of total exports, and is the main source of demand for output from the other economic sectors. Hence, there is an urgent need to boost economic activities, support business recovery and resilience, increase efficiency of companies as they recover and regain resilience and contain increasing costs. This is why we have high hope on RMK 12. Can we move to slide 4? Okay. With current unprecedented scenario, what is our industry's perspective? Based on the current economic landscape, the GDP growth rate is expected to rise drastically from negative 5.6% of 2020 to 3 to 4% in 2021, as projected by Bank Negara Malaysia, while the World Bank has projected a growth of 4.5%. Beyond 2021 and moving forward, it is without a doubt that the 12th Malaysia Plan and the budget 2022, which are set on shared prosperity and to revive the economy, would be two very key policy instruments that would guide growth and recovery in the right direction ahead. We will congratulate Dato Sri Mustapa for tabling a successful RMK 12 plans in the coming parliament sessions. There is a great sense of optimism among the business community with the increasing national vaccination rates through the National COVID-19 Immunization Program and also through PICAS, Public-Private Partnership COVID-19 Industry Immunization Program. Ladies and gentlemen, we also expect a V-shaped recovery in Malaysia to catch up. The economic recovery will be underpinned by higher external demand and gradual improvement in domestic demand. There is expectation for recovery to accelerate going into 2022, supported by normalization of economic activities, as well as the positive spillovers from continued improvement in external demand. However, we have to be mindful that the continued risk of the pandemic, which could have a weaker than expected global growth recovery and impact external demand. It is also observed that the export is growing at a slower rate than import and could result with Malaysia continue to be stuck in the deindustrialization dilemma. Under this report of DOSM 2021, premature deindustrialization has been prevalent in Malaysia since 1990s and has not improved since then. Malaysia is no longer attractive as a low-cost location. The productivity rates need to improve. Focus should be given on higher value-added manufacturing industries like exports, sophistication, which are crucial in Malaysia attaining its high income level status. This is what we are hoping for since many years ago. In order to move to higher value-added production, there is need for transformation in the manufacturing landscape to more sophisticated technology adoption, as well as having the right set of human talents that are highly skilled to support the transformation in the manufacturing ecosystem. Can you move to slide 5? Investors' confidence has been impacted by the pandemic period due to lockdowns and uncertainties in the reopening of economy. Many also have faced severe disruptions to their export and global supply chain markets. At the same time, we could also be losing some investors, mainly the MNCs, that are unable to sustain their operations in Malaysia due to their inability to sustain their production costs, inability to diversify into high technology manufacturing, or slow in greening manufacturing production capability or capacities. But more important, as nearby regional countries becoming more competitive like Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and Philippines. Due to global lockdowns implemented during the pandemic period, which we continue to see happening until today, with the resurgence of the new variants, many manufacturers have also faced supply disruption due to their dependence on imported inputs for production. Economic recovery is likely to see downsizing of businesses, merger of business to achieve economy of scale, diversification of products or business activities, or even business closure, given the toll that pandemic has had on business operations and sustainability. There is bound to be job displacements, widening of skills gaps, impact on labor productivity, given the transformation that will take place. It will also see higher adoption of technology, digitalization, automation, upskilling, and reskilling of workers. This transformation and investment will take time and resources, but are inevitable for industries in order to remain relevant, sustainable, and competitive in this new normal business ecosystem. Ladies and gentlemen, this is above all our industry's perspective. Now I will touch on the what industry's expectations. Can you move to slide 6? There are altogether 6 major expectations. Ladies and gentlemen, the next 2 to 3 years would be crucial to rebuild the economy and businesses and towards moving to a high-income economy that is rooted on high technology and high value-added activities. That's why we trust the 12th Malaysia Plan, RMK 12, will further strengthen and exemplify the government's commitment to realize the target of a developed economy, taking into consideration of how the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the landscape of the economic and business environment in an unprecedented manner. In this regard, the industry looks forward to the continued support for the manufacturing sectors and manufacturing service-related sectors towards transforming to activities that are high technology-based and high value-added in nature. I want to touch on the expectation number 1. Investments are central to growth and sustainable development and will drive the economic's productive capacity, job creation, and income. It is therefore imperative to continue to support existing domestic and foreign investors, especially during these challenging economic conditions, as they would be instrumental to foster highly skilled job creation, productivity growth, and move towards a high income economy. Focus must be on attracting high technology and high value added investments to address the premature deindustrialization in order to complete the whole value chain of complex and sophisticated products that we are aiming for. To support such investment, we must develop industrial parks, clusters with ready-made lots, like plug and play like that, to entice foreign investors to set up quickly in Malaysia. Speed is the essence. We need to set up fully high-tech special investment zones as smart manufacturing campuses to attract high technology and high value-added manufacturing investments and activities. I quote an example. We can set up a hub like the agriculture, aquaculture, or food hub at the East Coast there. And we have these special investment zones only cater for this agriculture, aquaculture, and food industries. Then you can attract more investors into these less developed states. Expectation number 2, labor force. This is an issue always happen in Malaysia. We overly reliant on the foreign workers. A dynamic labor force, which is globally competitive, able to adapt and adjust to the adoption of automation and the changing manufacturing landscape, and the demands of technological advances is another critical factor to support economic recovery and growth. There are many investors always ask a question, where can we find the talents in Malaysia? In fact, technical vocational education and training is the one. It's a pivotal in providing the skilled workforce required for economic transformation and next stage of growth. A pool of highly trained TVET graduates is able to attract investments, support smart and knowledge-based manufacturing, and drive innovation and productivity in a high technology and high value-added manufacturing environment. Much headway has already been achieved towards transforming the TVET ecosystem in the country, especially with the establishment of the National TVET Council. We hope to see more efforts to strengthen the industry linkages to address mismatch. We always face this problem of mismatch of skills and match demand-driven human talents needs by moving towards more demand-driven approach, such as you praise and train models, co-ownership models, center of excellence, and teaching factories, etc. Equally important and not to be forgotten is the need to have a clear and holistic foreign labor policy. In Malaysia, we used to face a lot of the unclear foreign workers policies or inconsistent foreign worker policy. To support the manufacturing, certain industrial processes will continue to require the unskilled and low-skilled labor, which cannot be filled by locals. But conclusions, we need to look at how to develop our local talents to replace the foreign workers. The expectation number 3 is on R&D. R&D and innovation have a pivotal roles in laying the foundation of economic development and growth and improving the people's well-being. Even the last Malaysia Plan, there is 11 Malaysia Plan, had already outlined an innovation strategy that is targeted at the enterprise and societal level, which is a shift from the previously practiced conventional top-down approach. We hope RMK 12 will further enhance innovations and provide more new ways of mindsets. The plan was to strengthen and improve the collaboration between the key stakeholders of quadruple helix, that is government, academia, industry, and people. For business, enterprises have typically been the driver of R&D activities in Malaysia. The National Survey of Research and Development 2019 report showed that R&D expenditure for business enterprise in Malaysia is quite low and also declined in 2018. In view of this, there is an urgent need to further enhance new investments in research and development, especially by SMEs. SMEs always find difficulties to set up their own R&D unit. We need more collaborative R&D between private sector and the local research institutions, and to develop sufficient R&D manpower to support the R&D activities in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, and now I want to touch on expectation number 4. As a trading nation, we must continue to boost trade and expand market by strengthening forward linkages and lengthen global value change to increase export earnings. On this note, I think our YB Dato Sri has done very good job when he was the meeting minister at that time. We must continue to pursue more FTAs to allow entry to new markets competitively and facilitate production of high quality goods. In addition, it is imperative to build local capacity to take opportunity of changes in the global market landscape, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. We must continue to support new businesses and diversification of existing business ventures in the essential goods as well as for all import substitution. FMM has continued to support efforts to strengthen primary, secondary, tertiary suppliers via this industrial linkage program, and we hope to see more support in this area from the government in supporting local industry and in helping them building their production capacity. We must always promote buy made in Malaysia, beli buatan Malaysia, especially when it comes to government procurement and local development projects. This, during this period of time, will enhance the local SMEs for their survival. Now I want to touch on our expectation number 5. The adoption of technology and the digitalization now is even more critical as the businesses adapt to the new normal to maintain sustainability, competitiveness, and respond quickly to rapid market demands. We see an acceleration over a wide area of manufacturing activities and processes, including design, procurement, production, marketing, logistics, worker management, office administration. SMEs in particular continue to need assistance to cross automation gaps and identify the right technologies which would bring them towards the next level of industrialization. Online of digital platform will be the preferred way to do business. Hence, facilitation to take businesses online, adopt digital tools, position their products online, etc. must be focused on. Equally critical would be an efficient local logistics ecosystem to support digitalization, use of Industry 4.0 technologies, and new work practices affordable and good quality broadband access must be provided to businesses and all industrial estates. Especially during now, many companies or businesses are using WFH, work from home. It's important that the broadband and consistency of the speed is very important. And lastly, our expectations, number 6. We need to look at the new areas of growth, such as, number 1, Industry 4.0 solution and service providers. We need to reduce food imports. Currently, almost every year, Malaysia imported 60 billion of food products. And we encourage more local agriculture and aquaculture and target other cash crops, especially those which are used for downstream food production, transform idle land as an agriculture, aquaculture, and food processing cluster with well-planned, catered, guarded, fully integrated industrial parks, as well as for vertical farming. We also need to focus on green and renewable industries, green food processing, solar cell modules and inverters, energy efficient vehicle, which we have been discussing and talking for a while on these EEV vehicles, and also the advanced machinery and also parts. We also need to touch on cost saving and environmental friendly production techniques that can bring down costs and reduce carbon emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, can you move to slide 8? Is the last slide. Now, it is imperative, and I hope that all policies and measures introduced in the 12th Malaysia Plan adhere to the following policies guiding principles to ensure that it is implementable, effective, and resourceful in a win-win outcome for all and address the expectation of the industrial sector during this very critical period for all. Although this is basically is our FMM's 4 guiding principles, but we believe that this policies is also important if can be implementable by the government. There is 4 C's. Number 1 is credibility. We need to be practical, pragmatic, implementable, and we also need to be clearly defined, and explicit outcomes, no room for discretion, and we also need to have consistency, no U-turn, or all these type of things. No sudden shifting of goalposts. Rules apply consistently at federal, state, and interagency levels, and the law is certainty. And we publish it and gazette it, and we follow and implement it with effectiveness. And we also have certain expectations on the following, especially the 12th Malaysia Plan. If we are able to do these 4 I's, it means improvement economic growth by focusing on generating better revenue and lower cost of doing business, the first I. The second I is improve well-being of people by focusing on enhancing the purchasing power and lower cost of living. The third I is improve confidence level of both foreign and domestic investors by focusing on right policies, strengthen capital market, and also strong currency. The last I is improve institutional reforms, especially by focusing on anti-corruption and betterment of government administration efficiency. This is a few of the key points that FMA wanted to share with all participants, and we strongly believe this RMK 12 prepared by our EPU, led by our Minister YB Dato Sri Mustapa, will be a successful one. Thank you very much for listening to my long briefing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri. It wasn't long at all. I thought it was very engaging. And I like the fact that you mentioned there's so many things that the government could help the private sector in terms of ensuring that you achieve your own objectives. And I like the fact that you look into investment, strengthening both domestic and international FDI, because this is very foreign as well as domestic. And I think this then we have a very engaging discussion later, whereby if you look at the landscape of household in our country, the purchasing power is not high. And yet we would like to then say that, oh, let's try to create strong domestic demand. So this is something of a mismatch that I think the 12th Malaysian Plan could also try to work out properly, this alignment. And by Malaysia, yes, Tan Sri, I think that's one of the most important thing that we should do. Your credibility, consistent, clear, and certainty in terms of policy shaping is very important, I think, very important to ensure that the business fraternity and community can really invest in long-term strategies, because the goals are not shifting, goalposts are not shifting, as you rightly mentioned. Wonderful, wonderful presentation. Thank you, Tan Sri. I'm sure we'll have more discussion later. Now, if I may, like to bring you to our third, very special part of society, which is civil society. And for here, I would like to invite Yang Berbahagia Prof. Dato Dr. Denison Jayasooria, Honorary Professor of Institute of Ethnic Studies, UKM. And his presentation today is, what is the expectation and role of civil society organizations in the 12th Malaysian Plan? If you please, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning to YB Menteri, Dr. Zunika, Tan Sri, Dr. Suraya, and all the participants. I think we have been having a very interesting presentation and review so far. I'm sure there will be lots of questions. Someone is assisting me with my slides, and if that could be, yes. So as was told, what is the expectation and role of CSOs in the 12th Malaysia Plan? Next, please. Yeah, we thank the Minister and EPU for this opportunity. I had the opportunity of getting the text of the Minister's speech, and so I recognize and thank him for recognizing CSOs as an essential building block of development. He also affirmed that in the 12th Malaysia Plan will continue to cooperate and recognize CSO contribution towards socio-economic development. Over the years, CSOs and NGOs have had regular contact with EPU in development planning. The Malaysian CSO SDG Alliance, to which I am the co-chair, has been working very closely on SDGs since October 2015. CSOs call the government in the 12th Plan to strengthen the third sector, like how the private sector and public sector is defined. And this can be defined as non-profit sector or the alternative sector, the third sector, voluntary sector. I've got a simple outline of 6 key points, but before that, 2 or 3 preliminary points to that, but looking largely at the role of CSOs as it links to SDGs, as it links to development planning. Next, please. I wanted to highlight the size of the civil society or the voluntary sector. The major portion is registered through the Societies Act, and that includes 11 different categories. There are over 77,000 such organizations with over 2 million. This is from KDN data. We also have non-profit companies under the Companies Act. You got the trustees deed and so forth. So there are over 1,300 linked to companies, foundations, and so forth. But a sizable section of this third sector is the cooperative sector, because it doesn't come under manufacturing and the traditional business sector. Over 14,000 registered under 9 categories with over 9 million. What we are seeing is the 12th plan should recognize an emerging sector, which is the social economy, social enterprise. Europe and Latin America uses solidarity economy. ILO and others have very good documentation on an alternative economy, which is more community-based, which is resilient, and which withstood the community when private sector withdrew in the onslaught of COVID and other things, especially for rural, poor, even informal sector, where these resilient alternatives emerged. So wanting this to be noted, the size is large, but it's not computed together to see its impact. Next, please. Now, I took, because there wasn't much on the 12th plan, Sumua Rasia till September 27, but I was told a pointer to the 12th plan is the VNR report. And the VNR report 2021 makes a very strong commitment to the whole of nation approach, the term multi-stakeholder, this partnership model, Quatra, Helix, which model of government, industry, community, and academy is presented. And this is one of the discussions with EPU in the preparation of the VNR, the photo. Next, please. Now, in this document, and I make references to the pages, there is the inclusion of CSOs and NGOs as partners in localizing SDG. Specific reference to the SDG Alliance, the APPGM in enhancing. It makes a promise that they would sort of reformulate, re-innovate the National SDG Council as an oversight mechanism, and in the write-up on localizing SDGs, efforts to work with local authority, district office, district level interagency delivery task force, the interagency delivery task force to be multi-stakeholder, civil society, private sector, academia, enabling policies, effective coordination, capacity building, funding. There's a promise to activate the SDG Council, the National Steering Council, disaggregated data. What is important is our development planning is excellent, but we need to strengthen the delivery mechanism, and NGOs are saying they can play a key part. The SDG VNR makes a tremendous commitment. Is this reflected in the 12th plan or not? If not, it'd be a lot of policies and implementation might be weak. Next. Now, NGOs are saying they are partners in development. They are agents of development, and government needs to recognize us. I know Dr. Zunika very well, and in her presentation and the slides, make no reference to CSO. I think it's not so, but the PowerPoint didn't. So I'm making the point, at least in the copy that I got through email, there's no reference. Is this an omission? Because in the policy development framework, in that slide, there is specific mention of private sector as leaders and development partners. So sedih sikit lah that CSOs dalam gambaran in all the strategic thrust is not mentioned. And this will have an impact because lead agencies, government agencies will continue to ignore us. And so it is important to include community actors as a critical partner in this process, recognizing CSO partnership, multi-stakeholder. All these are terms we have used, but the diagrammic presentation did not provide that, and I hope that is rectified in the actual document as the promise in the minister's speech. So partners at ground level, complementary role, the good example of the VNR preparation and CSOs with EPU, the third sector funding personnel needs to be better documented and calculated as a natural resource. I think Tan Sri shows manufacturing income, expenditure, taxes are very clearly computed. CSOs are all micro, they are all seen as insignificant, but collective with CSR and so forth can be a sizable contribution to the nation, which is saving taxpayers as well, but it's the wealth and heritage of the community. So professionals, academic, businesses, and so forth, in this context of what I would call natural, national, or voluntary nation-building personalities. Okay, next, please. So there is the strength of civil society, which needs to be emphasized in this context in a very strong way, that then leads on to people taking ownership. COVID has shown if people don't take ownership, any amount of health, lockdown, security is not going to solve it. If I don't care of my neighbor, if I don't take care of my health, my neighbor will be affected. And so am I, my brother's keeper, leaving no one behind, focused on trust building, which can only come from small units of very personal touch to vulnerable groups. CSOs are working with a whole cross-section of vulnerable communities, reaching the unreachable. I think government does effectively the poor, rural poor, but other sectors might be the hidden poor, the new emerging poor, the digital poor, women, domestic violence or other areas, indigenous people in more isolated communities, elderly children, disabled, undocumented. So this is the heart of the development agenda, not just while making money and being prosperous is important, it is equitable, leaving no one behind, and specific targeting from a multi-dimensional point of view is critical. I know EPU brought that in the 11th plan. It was strengthened in the midterm review. It was done in the poverty line review and so forth. Next. So in our roles, we are saying that civil society can provide the service at a much lower cost than the bureaucracy. So some of this could be contracted out, it could be passed on, even some direct services of elderly, even children and so forth, into other sectors like social enterprises and so forth, because of the human touch, the smallness. So in delivery, CSOs can play a key role to complement the government efforts, and that is being well documented through larger foundations like Yayasan Hazana or Mercy Malaysia that are well organized and more professionally, or WWF in conservation and other areas. So more holistic and integrated approach. So service delivery, assistance, next please, is in public policy. We feel that civil society has been very active. We have always had dialogues with Dr. Zunika and other EPU on this. We can have a grounded approach that brings the context, bottoms-up approach to top-down planning, and that is something we can add value and also the reform agenda. Just now in the EPU presentation, they highlighted the first 3 Ps of people, planet, and prosperity, but didn't highlight peace and partnerships in that. So governance, which includes addressing SDG 16, Malaysia standpoint and scorecard on SDG 16 is not good compared to its performance of the other SDGs. And so we might need to invest much more on addressing corruption, democratic freedoms, good governance, clean and fair elections, refugees, parliamentary reform, being active citizens in taking ownership of governance at the ground level. These are needed to build resilient communities that will set and support effective delivery. Next, please. I know my time is passing. Next, in the roles is monitoring and evaluation. We feel civil society can bring a constructive role in providing feedback. Often government is open. Sometimes they are upset with civil society because they think we hantam too much. But most more academically oriented, evidence-based presentation provides constructive feedback from the grassroots, data and information sharing, stakeholder participation is very critical, and this process must be transparent and open for benchmarking, for improvement, for trust building with the community, to diffuse politicization of development. Number 4, capacity building is quite critical. Some NGOs are well organized, well funded, others are not. And so training, direct focus on this is important, more investment in this. There are public universities, like for private sector, you got HRDF fund that private sector funds it. But for the voluntary and social sector, these might be more challenging in that context to improve competencies, standards, in service because of the nature and rise of mental illness, suicides, domestic violence, child abuse, domestic abuse, and so forth. And it's in this context that the Social Workers Act was proposed by the ministry, a lot of discussion, civil society, but it never moved in the years, and it's being stalled. So the competencies, professional standard setting is important. Scaling up is another point civil society has highlighted. They are doing good, like organic farm in one Asli village. They can have a multiplier effect, and agencies can actually decentralize their funding and support to mobilize communities, public universities in their projects in this context. Next, and I'll go fast, I only got a few more. Funding is critical because funding could be for services provided, for capacity, for research. There is a lot of money around from private sector, from international funding, but also for independent monitoring. But government could create more enabling environments through a more open tax exemption provision for individuals and companies, ringgit to ringgit financing, as was done by Magic recently for social enterprises. For every 1,000, government would top it up, a sort of approach. Community chest is another, because COVID showed that people could mobilize 1 ringgit, 10 ringgit, and it could reach millions in that crowdfunding style. Next, please. And so mechanisms for engagement becomes critical. Now it's very ad hoc. EPU is very open to CSOs in dialogue. We get invited and so forth. But an accreditation process might be needed, like the UN. It's transparent, it's open, it's got public criteria, there is a selection process, and anyone can apply and participate. And access to the 12th Malaysia Plan and SDGs could be, EPU could, as lead agency, provide that, or it could have some other mechanism. Our alliance is happy to help that, but to have, like how the minister has poverty circle, so civil society becomes a circle that will report, will be accountable, will be as a partner, will try and meet the things. But as well as another area, we have NGOs under Home Affairs. It's societies, KDN, its history was to control communism and so forth, and gangs. But societies are a vital part in which you need training. Health NGOs, welfare-based NGOs, women-based NGOs, Rukun Tetangga-based community groups, Housing Ministry Persatuan Penduduk, the cooperatives that we saw, large numbers, consumer associations with domestic trade, environmental NGOs with, there is no central register in which they can come together, they have a force to work with, and they can be in policy advocacy. And so a call might be in the 12th plan, should there be a multi-stakeholder task force for the development, policy, document, impact, financial allocation, to see what is the total allocation of government to the voluntary sector through all the various ministries. I don't think it has. So let me come to one more, be in this mechanism. I thought DOSM is doing a fantastic job, and many of us interacting, civil society, academics have been critical, but DOSM has been working closely, transparent in the SDGs in the work. They bring out good reports on manufacturing, agriculture, construction. Why not an annual report on the third sector? Why not on how much money is raised? What are the target groups? What is the staffing? What are the number of volunteers? A comprehensive study like labor market study, why shouldn't it be? Even academics and others could join in. It could create new job opportunities for social science graduates. You know, people, I'm much older, but anthropologists, sociologists are like a dying breed. Social workers and things like that. So the DOSM might give a facelift, like how it did to SDG indicators in the way they have published, in the way they have presented data as neutral, objective, and got us to work on with them from quantitative data to qualitative. And finally, my point in the conclusion is that we are valuable partners, and in the thrust and emphasis, I think all of us are supportive because the SDG, shared prosperity, inclusive development, multidimensional poverty are all key areas we have been working with. But we need to see the partner on the ground. This partnership must not be ad hoc, just word. It must build on mutual trust and recognition. It must be non-political and transparent. It must be, as the minister raised in the documents I've read, a whole nation approach, and to give the third sector its due recognition, along with public sector, private sector, the academic world, the third sector, the voluntary sector, and to provide enabling policies, institutional support, mobilize the grassroots movements for building inclusive, resilient communities. I know sometimes civil society can be difficult to cope with, but we mean well, we might speak dengan keras sikit, but we are always humbled by access, dialogue, and so forth. And that can be facilitated in-house by the organizations to depoliticize development and to enhance a more inclusive and resilient Malaysia. And people and the grassroots, the good citizens, need to be seen as the anchor along with the other parties that have been highlighted. I hope that in the table and in the new direction, ada satu arrow lah. I saw only 10 arrows, maybe 11 or 12 new economic opportunities, voluntary sector as new agents of support. That's my and thank you very much for giving civil society. Many of my friends read through what I was sharing to emphasize this. And thank you once again. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Prof. Denison. That was a very, very interesting and enlightening presentation. I really like your bit on this is the heart of the nation, and that the civil society organization will play a key role, and in a way, the last mile of delivery. And it can also ensure that government, as well as other initiatives, are being taken care of by the third pillar. Quadra Helix partnership is very interesting as well. And I believe one of the things that I really hope that will be taken, into public policy or legalities is the Social Worker Act. I think more of the millennials will go in if once we have the Social Worker Act up and running, as well as this. I mean, I like to see this the professionalism of all NGOs and CSOs, and also to have the multi-stakeholder task force. These are very, very interesting ideas and concepts that you have brought towards this webinar, Prof. Thank you very much. So we have about 20 minutes of Q&A with the public, and I shall try my best to moderate this. I think there's a lot of questions from the public to the government, so I shall spread the joy to other panelists as well. So maybe if I can start with Tan Sri Datuk So first, then I'll go to Dr. Zunika, and then I'll come back to you, Prof. So basically, two questions to Tan Sri Datuk So. The one question from me is basically you mentioned that firms are no longer able to compete on the low-skill, low-cost business model as a source of competitive advantage. Now, how would firms, big and small, react? I mean, will dividends to shareholders or profits to business owners fall? Since some of the retained profits need to be plowed back into the business, you mentioned that basically as a baseline, the report that you read, I think I read the same report, that there is really less participation by most companies to participate in R&D development. So how do you think, how would business people make these productivity improvements? And the second question is coming from Bina Ramanan from Family Frontiers. She said, please ensure there is at least 30% women in decision making. She said, how does the government encourage this from public and private sector? But again, maybe you can also give us, what would be your encouragement in the private sector and ensuring that 30% of women are in decision making? Thank you, Tan Sri. Sorry, Tan Sri, we can't hear you. You're...
Okay, sorry, I muted. All right, thank you for your two questions. The question one is on R&D. Industries actually should not look at investment in R&D as a reduction in their retained profits or lower their dividend, but must look at this from a long-term perspective. This one will definitely enhance their competitiveness. Look at the advanced country like Japan, Korea, even Singapore. or Europe countries, they spend a lot on R&Ds. Why their countries are still very prosperous? So these are things that the local companies, especially those multinational companies, should also assist the local SMEs to work together with them, and also to bring them in by having collaboration with the local researchers company or institutions, work together and improve our R&D. And many of the multinationals, their R&D centers is not in Malaysia. Most of the time they are at a certain place or in certain HQ. The HQ. It's good that they can bring part of R&D into Malaysia and work together with locals. And also on the SMEs, we are thinking that SMEs really need a lot of help from the government. So we are proposing that possible the government can provide the R&D vouchers to this small, medium enterprise, so that they have certain consistent funds from the government, so that they are able to improve their processes, improve their products. I view that for the long terms, the private sectors need to be determined to put in more money into R&D. This is our views. And then on the ladies or the second questions, of course, women are the pillar of the nation buildings. All industries will not discriminate on this. So we base on meritocracy, we base on your strength. If you are good, you can be the CEO, you can be the #1. So there is no restriction on this. And we hope that the government can able to work together with private sectors. Let us have fair chance for all the women to participate in the top management, middle management, and I believe that they are capable.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
possible they are better than some of the male.
Thank you, Sri. That's very brilliant suggestion, having R&D vouchers for the small businesses, as well as making sure multinationals bring their R&D here. That's very interesting. Thank you, Tan Sri. If I may, and of course, women are #1. Thank you very much. To Dr. Zunika, two questions. I think there's a lot here, but I'll just pick two questions for you for now. One is, Tan Sri mentioned about creating strong domestic demand as one of the, he feels the levers for enabling Malaysians to basically push our GDP growth. How would the government enable this trajectory? Such purchasing power of our workforce adequate? And of course, will wages go up? And the second question comes from Sean Chia, Executive Director of the Malaysian International Chamber of Commerce and Industry Governance and Enhancing the Civil Service. His question is, why don't we have a public service continuity plan where the government services are digitalized so as to continue services to the rakyat remotely from what we have learned from the pandemic? Digitization of the government will achieve RR forward, governance, transparency, and rapid promotion of digitalization as private sector will be forced to digitalize to access and submit applications via a digitalized government. Dr. Zunika, thank you.
Thank you for your question, Dr. Suraya. We have always had this debate in terms of whether we want to have a strong demand-driven growth or we want to go to other direction. And for the last, I think for the last decades, we have been putting in a strong demand-driven growth. I mean, it has been said that actually we are on the demand-driven economy. We are strong domestic demand as well. So in terms of whether we want to put in this policy of pushing in more into it, or we want to move to other direction, I think it's something that we have to balance. Giving the trajectory that we want to have to push on the purchasing power of our society, it shouldn't be based on transfer. It has to be based on productivity driven push for the increase in wage. So with this in mind, I think when we were saying that we need to push productivity higher, then we need to look into what actually can be done to push productivity. Definitely, it is in terms of technology, R&D, in terms of efficiency of doing business, getting more product that can go compete into the global market. So that is something that we have to work on. And during the 12th plan, I hope that we can work seriously on this so that in a way it can also help government in reducing the burden of providing transfer to our B40, for instance. So if we have this trajectory in terms of pushing up for more CE, definitely CE is something that we have been talking about in improving more CE to GDP, of which now we are at in 2020, the number is 37.2%. So we want to push higher for higher CE. And with this higher CE, it will definitely come through productivity push initiatives. So I think that's will answer the first question. In terms of digitalizing, the second question, in terms of digitalizing the government sector, this has been already put in place under the digital economy blueprint. Because under the digital economy blueprint, one of the sector that we are pushing to digitalize actually is the government sector. And we have a specific cluster by our KSN looking at how we have to digitalize our government sector. And definitely end-to-end service to the public is one of the priority that we are looking at. We want to push for higher end-to-end services so that there's no more burden in coming physically to the counter. You can only do your transaction at home. So this is something that actually has been already in place with regard to digitalization of our service sector. Thank you. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, you did, Dr. Zunika. Yes, you did. So basically, no wages increment if your productivity is not up. Yes, and no transfer payments in terms of that. And I think that's very fair. So basically, we make sure that any wage increment is based on productivity gains, and therefore this will not be inflationary. Yes, for the digitalization. Thank you very much for these answers, Dr. Zunika. If I may go back to Prof. Datuk Dr. Denison, there has been numerous complaints from civil society as well as think tanks like KRI that there is a high fragmentation and duplication of services when government do their aid and trying to disperse help to the general public who are deprived, experiencing certain deprivations. You state that we would have a stronger role of CSO to complement the government's initiative for an inclusive society. Now, what would be the steps that civil society organizations can take to ensure that they don't fall into the same, complaints made about government's service, basically that there will be no fragmentation, no duplication of resources, and what would be the coordinating mechanism that you think ought to be in place, Professor? Thank you.
Okay. I think the very nature of civil society, voluntary sector is its diversity, the richness, berbagai, as the focal point. And because of personality, their objectives, their goals, civil society doesn't want to become conformed to a structure of its kind. It's sort of breakaway groups. Having said that, there are umbrella bodies in Malaysia that are well organized and has a representative structure. I think one of the best is the National Council of Women's Organizations, NCWO, in its structure, its affiliates, its distribution. But that's voluntary. But the Malaysian Youth Council is mandatory under the Youth Act and Registration, MBM, has a legislative provision for its collective work among youth-based organizations. Then you have the cooperatives like Angkasa, which is a grouping of ones. So I think in some countries, they have what is called the Charities Commission that then brings together and define. Unfortunately or unfortunately, in Malaysia, as I highlighted, there are different legislative frameworks for registration and different governance, Society Act, the Companies Act, Companies Commission, Cooperatives Commission, that then can be enabling, or it's just a legal mechanism for you to operate. So I agree with you, the duplication, the competition, the infighting, all these are there, but bigger foundations or foundations that are seeking funding. One would be funding through Yayasan Hazana, are more coordinated, they are verified in their governance, the leadership staffing, and other bigger organizations I mentioned like WWF, Malaysian Association of the Blind. They're all well structured with very strong boards and foundations. I think the proposal I was making was for government to recognize this as actually a national asset, because public funds, public time and resources are taken, not for controlling, but for enabling and empowering. And that can be done, like EPU is relating to SDG, now Foreign Ministry to all the Universal Periodical Review organizations that are looking at CDO, CRC and things like that. But some form, and I thought it's a aptitude time post-COVID where CSOs played and grassroots groups played a key role for government to have a conversation together, to document it, to try and facilitate it. NGOs can do it on its own, but grants are tough for coordinating research work. So government might have to look at it, or it might not require money. It's just a Jabatan Kuasa, a task force. It is like Economic Action Council. This is the Social Action Council. EPU, if Dato Mustafa and EPU wants linked to SDG, it's a council. It might not be, it's a task force. It is a project of review, and public universities might already have the funding, and others of us in this field might be. So we recognize there's a problem, but that shouldn't deter us from finding a way. I think the private sector, I think Tan Sri would have, I think manufacturers are well coordinated. They might have their differences, but they're coming together. The chambers is there, the guilds is there. Whether they're all under one body or umbrella, that I don't know, but there's a need for networking, and government needs to create the legislative framework that is more enabling. and policies that will facilitate this stronger for the third sector to emerge in par with the others. If not, people will badmouth government. No? So it's better to win them and build their trust. Thank you. That's my point.
Oh, thank you, Prof. It's a very detailed answer on how we can actually achieve some of the challenges of duplication. And I think even there was a question from Dr. Doris Padmini Selvaratnam from FB Live, whereby there are challenges still prevails related to funding, database collection, volunteerism and sharing, networking, coordination with various stakeholders from various agencies to avoid duplication. So this is something that you have answered. How can there be more data sharing, transparency, and wider engagements to be done to avoid time, money, energy loss for community-centered, not race-based or religious-based approach? So then, then we go back to about two more questions for, maybe one more question for everybody. So for Tan Sri So back again, there's a question from the Facebook Live from Shu Ying. Tan Sri So, what are the industries that Malaysia manufacturers can easily move towards export sophistication besides E&E? And how willing are manufacturers to move away from low-cost manufacturing, i.e. hiring foreign workers and hiring local workers with minimum wages of 2,000 and 2,500 RM or automation? And the second one is from a comment, basically from Mustafa Kamal Mat Razali: reskilling, upskilling, and remobilize domestic human capital towards high value added economic sector and limited low cost manufacturing industry sector. This is something that he feels would be the answer. But yes, Tan Sri, if you may. I can't hear you, sorry, you have to unmute.
The question that you asked on how the company is able to set up to the advanced technology, I believe that in Malaysia, the mid-tier companies has the better resources to venture into more advanced setup, especially using the latest IR 4.0. Whereas the SMEs, based on FMM surveys as of today, the percentage of SMEs participate into these advanced technology processes or smart manufacturing is still very, very low. That's why the government, the digitalization, the blueprint, need to emphasize a lot on how to bring these SMEs towards how to improve them. Because a lot of SMEs, they are dependent a lot, honestly, on foreign workers. These are the area that they face. They normally short of resources, especially working capital. So we view that for the start, I believe mid-tier company has a higher chance. They are quite established. Of course, those large local companies, they have all the capabilities. But our emphasis should be on two, mid-tier companies and also SMEs. The SMEs, I believe that because there are too many in Malaysia, there are about close to 900 or thousands SMEs, include micros and all this. In order for them to accept this IR 4.0 or advanced technology, some of them need to carry out M&A, merger and acquisition, so that they can merge together, and they also can work together with the foreign partners. For example, there are other SMEs from overseas, like China or Taiwan or Korea or Japan or even Singapore. Some of the SMEs in that advanced countries, they are more equipped. If you merge with them, and work with them, I think they will bring all these SME Malaysians to the international markets and become more competitive. This is my reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato Sri. So if I may go back to Dr. Zunika, there is from Bina Ramanan. There are approximately 200,000 binational Malaysian families in Malaysia who can contribute effectively to the country's annual GDP. Their immediate Malaysian families will benefit, and the country can access if they can be employed without restrictions. In bracket, their visas have a statement, quote unquote, any form of employment is strictly prohibited. Many of them are professionals and come in with varied talents. Some of them work overseas with their Malaysian families live here, bringing the much needed foreign exchange cash flows in the country. Yet these spouses of Malaysian receive pushbacks by severe restrictions on employment and their short-term visas issued by immigration, which forces Malaysian women to migrate to their husbands' home country, depriving Malaysia of its valuable human capital and income. Any comments, Dr. Zunika?
Yeah, I think the question is rather very granular at this point of time when we are discussing about the broad perspective of the policy. I would like to take this question offline in trying to answer the questions, the specific question posed just now. But in terms of the labour market, definitely we will want to see a more effective or more efficient labour market with participation of higher participation of women, formally or informally, in contributing to the economy. And I believe that this is something that we can see through during the next 5 years in terms of initiative that we want to put forward to encourage more women participation in the country. No doubt that in terms of the public sector, we has actually achieved the target of 30% women participation in the public sector. But in the private sector, we want to see that happen as soon as possible, because we have not only women, but I think the availability of digitalization, technology, and new development in ways of doing business actually provide opportunity for women at home to participate in the labour market. So I think this is something that we should look forward to in our 12th Malaysia Plan. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm muted. Sorry. We are now at 11:20, and I think we'll just have one question, but I'll give it to all panelists as well as to give your concluding remarks. Maybe I can start with Prof. Denison, and then Tan Sri, and then Dr. Zunika. And maybe I'll just ask a question. From Adriana Abu, saying that, we have what we call middle income trap. There are many structural issues in terms of the foundations of society, the value system. There are claims of it being steeped in corruption and double standards. And if we are to reset the economy, what are the things that we could do in order to prevent such occurrences and to ensure that we have a better Malaysia for all? If I might start with Professor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A good question, but it will take a whole morning for us to discuss that theme. But basically, it is a citizens' participation. How do we enhance greater awareness in the citizenry on public issues, accountability issues, and so forth? sometimes our tension between development and people is that the model tends to be more one of handout, patronage, and dependency. Now, if that is the model, then people are not going to question. They just want to take as much as possible from whoever would offer them. That is a disempowering model. I don't think in the Tun Razak's Green Book, Red Book, and the operations method approached it that way. It was an empowerment of the community. It is something like the Amana Ikhtiar model. There is no free money. The women who borrow Amana Ikhtiar's money pay back for the administrative and operating price, and they then become successful with the investment. It's micro loans, but it's 95%. They are trained, they take ownership, they take leadership. It gives dignity to the people. I think the difficulty we are faced is disinformation, disempowerment, where the centenary become klangkabut and believe whatever is being said. And I think for this, we need a greater public awareness. I know a lot of online discussions and so forth, but more systematic investment in adult learning. I think in other countries, they have this good model. Malaysia introduced community colleges as an effort, but community colleges ended up targeting post-form 5. They did some courses. It's not adult learning. If I'm a 40-year-old taxi driver, what competencies must I now enhance? Maybe learning English, mannerism, other kinds, or new skills. Why a 40 or 50-year-old person cannot be trained in digital marketing? When in India, farmers, fishermen are looking at climate change before fishing, or their prices of milk or tobacco or other things online before they are doing the sale. So it is actually empowerment of the people, and that cannot just be development vis-a-vis income, jobs, and so forth. It has to be fundamental freedoms. So fundamental freedoms is democratic rights. In Malaysia, we would say based on the federal constitution and Rukun Negara. That's mine. Empower the people and they will make the stand. They will build the nation. And politicians need to facilitate. If they don't, then they face the wrath of the people at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I think we are a bit struggling for time to ensure that our YB minister will be able to do the closing remarks. So maybe no, not you. It's me. Sorry, it's not your fault. So maybe Tan Sri So, maybe 1 minute, and Dr. Zunika, 1 minute concluding remarks.
Yeah, from industry, so we just want to emphasize is on our education system, is to have a big pool of talents. And we need talent development so that they are capable and they are able to do the things that they think is good for the country, good for themselves. But sometimes our education systems, we produce too many graduates that is not matched with the industries. And we also need to reduce the brain drain so that our countries to keep these good talents in Malaysia, and the government should have right policies for investments and also for businesses so that everyone are able to earn a good living. And another important is we need to get rid of the over-dependent on foreign workers mentality. And with all this, we are able to move away from the middle income track. And the very important is the government policies must sync with the private sectors. This is my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri. And last but not least, Dr. Zunika, 1 minute, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for everybody for listening to our conversation throughout the session today. I think from our perspective, EPU, we would like to ask the public to receive this document with an open heart and see what we have in store for the next 5 years. Definitely, this is an indicative planning. It is just what government want to drive the economy, but the player definitely is everybody. And we don't want to leave anyone behind. Definitely not CSO, Prof. This is actually very timely with the introduction of Keluarga Malaysia, of which we should embark on the journey together as one big Malaysia, Keluarga Malaysia, under the whole of nation approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, distinguished panelists, and I give it back to you, MC Encik Hidayah. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. Terima kasih Yang Berusaha Dr. Suraya Ismail, Yang Berusaha Dr. Zunika Binti Mohamed, Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Dato Soh Tian Lai, and Yang Berbahagia Profesor Dato Dr. Denison Jayasooria for the fruitful discussion. Let's spam chat box and FB comment with thank you note to our moderator and panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, before we end our session, let us hear again from Yang Berhormat Dato Sri Mustapa Mohamed, Minister in the Prime Minister's Department Economy, for his closing remark and takeaway note. Dipersilakan.
Terima kasih banyak. Thank you, Dr. Suraya. Thank you, Dr. Zunika, Tan Sri So, and Dr. Denison. I've listened attentively to all your remarks, all your comments, your presentation, as well as responses to the questions raised. I think this has been a very productive, very active discussion. I do not want to go into details. My team has jotted down some of your proposals. I just want to highlight quickly two general points. Firstly, the importance of engagement and consultation. I have been doing this all along, and I would like to assure you that going forward, I'm talking about post-RM7 presentation in Parliament, we will continue this engagement. That's point number one. And this is just the beginning. This one here, thank you, Dr. Suraya, for moderating this one. The one we're having this morning is just the beginning. There's more to come, and we hope to be able to get your support. That's point number one. Point number two, Dr. Denison in particular, CSOs, we take a note of your point. What we'll do is we will incorporate some of your comments in the implementation plan. Accompanying the document will be a plan as to how we want to implement the 12th Malaysia Plan. And in drawing up that plan, we'll try to incorporate your ideas. But more than that, I think I got two proposals. One is, two remarks. One is there's a need for someone in government to champion. You know, you've been articulating this view a few times. I've listened to your presentation. You are very focused and, in promoting the more active engagement of CSOs in Malaysia. So we have another conversation on this. I think we'll have to find a champion in government to bring all the CSOs together. And the other will be, there's some specific proposals you have submitted today, including annual report, this kind of thing, more active engagement in monitoring implementation government policies and programs. CSOs are a lower cost solution. Anyway, we will continue this conversation. I think what you can do is you put this in a form of a letter sent to me, and then I'll forward this to relevant people in government. And in that letter, you might want to propose that someone, a minister, government minister, should coordinate all CSOs under one umbrella. At the moment, I think you're right. You are all over the place. Some agencies have given you a lot of recognition. Some others have not been paying you enough attention. Anyway, we'll have an offline conversation in this. In the meantime, you draft a letter to me, and I'll see where that letter should go to. Yeah, but I think the main thing is to get a minister in the government of Malaysia to bring all CSOs together and to see how CSOs can play a more meaningful role in not only policy formulation, but also in the implementation of some government policies. So thank you, Dr. Sri, Dr. Zunika, Tasiso, and Datuk, Dr. Denison, and particular participants as well. We've been online for about 2 hours. As I said, this is just the beginning. There's more to come, and we look forward to your continued active participation and support. Thank you. On that note, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you, Dato Sri. Thank you.
Thank you,
Dr.
Yang Mohamed,
Zunika.
Dato Sri Mustapa Mohamed. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this webinar. Before that, I would like to invite everyone to turn on your camera for a group photo session. And please give us your big smile. Okay, please keep a moment while our technical person taking your sweet picture. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Economic Planning Unit Prime Minister Department EPU, thank you Yang Mohamed, Dato Sri Mustapa Mohamed for your time. Thank you to our moderator and panelists, and thank you to all participants who joining us today. I wish you all stay safe, stay healthy. My name is Nur Hidayat Salman. Terima kasih. Jumpa lagi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.